from Sudan.
From Sudan?
Yeah.
Have you come from Calais? Have you come from Calais? Have you come from Calais?
Yes.
How many of you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
13 people.
12.
13 people.
13 of you. Are you okay? You don't have life jackets?
We don't have jacket. We don't have jacket.
We're just coming alongside, you might be able to see in the distance, the 4th boat of migrants that we have seen so far today. And I have to say, you know, it is an unsettling image coming this close. Hello? You okay? Okay? Are you okay? Where are you from? You okay? Where have you come from? Iran. And we're very close, you can see, to the white cliffs of Dover now. Our boat driver is just calling the Coast Guard now, so obviously we'll stay with this boat, make sure it's safe as it comes into shore. But it really has been quite an extraordinary morning out on the English Channel. Of course, we know this is now a very familiar scene. That doesn't make it any less unsettling to see. We have seen 3 boats already. This is the 4th one. The first was in the distance, quite a way off towards French waters, and the second, as we came back towards Dover, we got really quite close there as well, and they were cheering UK as we drove past that second boat.
Well, in a moment, we're going to hear from our Europe correspondent Michelle Clifford, who's in Calais, and our political correspondent Kate McCann, who's in Westminster. First, though, let's go to Dover, speak to Ashna Huranag. Ashna, as we were hearing from Ali there, 4 boats that she'd spotted today. What's happening in Dover? What happens when they get there?
Well, just a few moments ago, we spotted those suspected migrants that my colleague Ali Fortescue spoke to there, people from Sudan, Kurdistan, Iran, making their way to shore here at Dover. They were all wearing life jackets by this point. That's because they've been picked up by a border force vessel and then transferred over to the jetty here, where they were met by authorities and police, Coast Guard as well, who are taking their details, checking their temperature. Of course, we are in the midst of a pandemic still, so all of those checks do need to go ahead. This only adds now to the total of more than 700 migrants having made their way ashore here to Dover in small boats over the last 6 days. And those calm conditions only make it more of people taking advantage of those calm conditions. But it doesn't mean that those waters are calm and still. They are particularly quite treacherous out in the middle of the channel there. We saw Ali there being sort of surrounded by waves. And if you're in that small dinghy being driven by often a very inexperienced pilot, that can be incredibly dangerous. And as we heard, a lot of those boats are overwhelmed with the amount of people that are on them. We saw a majority of them in those boats are men. We did, however, see one female in there that Ali referenced. Yesterday here in Dover, we saw the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, seeing for herself the issues that the border force here are having to contend with. She went out to see and saw firsthand. We also saw yesterday the Ministry of Defence deployed an RAF aircraft to oversee the crossings from the skies. It'll be interesting to see whether we see any of that today. Of course, those talks, which my colleagues will talk about shortly, are going ahead in Paris later today. But among all the things they're going to be discussing, there is one thing that Britain and France can't change, and that's the geography of where I am and of where we are in relation to France. We are 20 miles away from Calais, and no walls, no blockades in the middle of the ocean, middle of the channel, I should say, is going to stop that from being a bit of a magnet for those people.
Ashna, thank you for that. Let's speak to our Europe correspondent, Michelle Clifford, who's in Calais. Michelle, on your side, you know, there's a huge focus from British politicians about the French doing more to stop people getting on those boats in the first place. Give us an idea of what it actually is like and how that journey starts.
Well, the way it works is that the migrants get in touch with the smugglers, they pay them a fee, and then they're told to come to the beaches in Calais, hide in the dunes, and we filmed overnight a couple of days ago, and we saw 6 migrants hiding in the dunes, and they wait for a phone call from the smugglers to say whether a boat is coming or not. They might have to come back several nights in a row, but they're handing over huge sums of money, as little as £1,000 and as much as £3,000 or £4,000. So the smugglers are making a lot of money. But they have no regard really for the safety of the people that they're putting into these boats, and they're very often putting double and more the number of people that should be on these inflatables. A couple of nights ago we were on another beach and we saw a boat not heading away from Calais but coming in. There was no sound of an engine because the boat was drifting, and we managed to talk to the migrants on board that vessel. They'd actually got out into the channel, were heading for the UK, and then suddenly they realised they'd run out of fuel. The engine stopped working, and local fishermen say this is a common occurrence. The smugglers only put enough fuel in to allow the migrants to get into British waters, not to get to UK shores. And of course that meant they were drifting. They were incredibly lucky because of the direction of the wind, and it blew them back to France and they got back here safely. But they were very lucky not to have been hit by a large vessel. There are ferries and tankers and ships travelling through this area all of the time. There is no shortage of migrants here who are desperate to get to the UK. They're willing to hand over the money to the smugglers, and perhaps many of them don't realise just how dangerous it is out in the Channel, because on a clear day from here you can actually see the UK shoreline. It seems tantalisingly close. I really don't think that many of the migrants realise quite what the risk they are taking.
Yeah, Michelle, thank you for that. Let's go to Westminster now, speak to our political correspondent, Kate McCann. Kate, the Immigration Minister, Chris Philp, meeting his French counterpart today. This has been an ongoing issue for several years, and there's been a lot of money spent by both the British and the French to try and solve this problem. So, past just throwing money at it, what happens today, potentially?
Well, you're right about the fact that this has been an ongoing issue now for a number of years, and you heard from Ashna and Michelle some of the reasons why it is still a really difficult problem to solve, not least because there are people willing to spend vast amounts of money, there are smugglers willing to help them, and as Ashna said, you can't change the geography of where the two coastlines are. So today, this meeting, Chris Philp is going out there on behalf of the UK government. It's designed really to sort of lay the groundwork for Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, to go out later on when there is hopes of a deal between the UK and France to try and do more to stop people from starting to make that journey in the first place. Today, expect those talks to cover things like the French doing more to police the beaches where people leave from. As Michelle was saying, it's quite well known there are around 5 or 6 different areas where migrants tend to leave specific beaches. The UK government wants to see the French do more to patrol those areas and stop people from making the journey in the first place. And from the UK side, there is a really strong desire from Boris Johnson at the top of government to do more to send people back to France if it can be proven that actually they should have claimed asylum in France in the first place. Now, there are a whole myriad of really complicated rules governing this situation, including about the areas of safe countries where you are supposed to or you can make an application, and whether or not you can travel to another safe country if you want to do that. There are also rules around sending people back, and it's a really complicated system that the government will have to navigate if it wants to make changes, all, of course, in the context of Brexit, which makes everything much more complex. Edward Arger, the Health Minister, was asked earlier on today about the Prime Minister's intention to change the laws.
What we are seeing are people not only taking a legal route in, but an incredibly dangerous route for them and their families. So it is in everyone's interest we tackle this. What I think the Prime Minister was referring to there is at the moment the approach to this and the returns of people who come illegally to this country is governed by the Dublin framework. That framework does achieve the ability to return illegal migrants back to France, but it also has very short timescales within which that can be done. It's very inflexible. I think what he's looking at, quite rightly, is greater flexibility in our ability to negotiate something which allows us greater flexibility in returning people who have come here illegally, who've been through due process and need to be returned back to France.
Now, there are all kinds of issues with returning people back to France. There are the practical issues of doing that. The UK has actually managed to return fewer than 10 people using that regulation so far because it's so complicated and difficult to do. There are also issues like migrants deliberately trying to hide their fingerprints, for example, so it can't be proven where they came from. And, of course, the moral arguments too about asylum seekers and whether the UK should be accepting more people. All of this will make it very difficult for the UK and France to strike a deal. But today is the first stage in that process, and both sides hope they can do something to deter people from making that treacherous journey.